Thank you a lot. I hope you can hear me very well. So today I'm going to talk about developer portals, API catalogs, and marketplaces. Because there are lots of these words flying around, right? Everyone is using them, but what does it really mean and which one do we need? I think that's a question that lots of people ask themselves. A little bit about me. I am lead API consultant with Codecentric since 7.5 years now. Since the beginning, I worked with API projects, and guess what? My first project was building an API developer portal, which maybe was not a developer portal, but it was named like that at least, right? So that's also a bit how I got into the space. And since 3.5 years, I'm only doing API consultant. See, mainly on API design, anything regarding API enablement, API platform topic, integration platform topic, anything, right? So why does this even matter? Why are we talking today about these topics? First of all, I think you know APIs are everywhere. We already heard it this morning again in the keynote. No AI without APIs. We all know there are lots of APIs out there. And the more there are, the more complex it gets, right? We need to find them, know where they are, how to use them, and so on. And we have lots of topics to handle if we are providing APIs or if we want to consume APIs. We need to handle discoverability. Where do people find it? How do they find it? Where do people find the documentation? How do we describe the onboarding that it's very intuitive? We have to care for integration, governance, monetization, operations, versioning, deprecation. You know, there's so many topics related to APIs that we somehow have to handle. And the third thing is, there are different tools that help us, especially on the discovery aspect, which are portals, catalogs, and marketplaces. But then, actually, they're mixed a lot. So someone calls something a developer portal, someone else calls it a marketplace, the third person calls it a catalog. So what is it and why? And what impact does it have if we call something a developer portal or a marketplace? That's what we want to look at today in my talk. So, first of all, focus on the consumers. These are the people that later use APIs that we provide, right? So they want to find our APIs. That's the discoverability aspect. That's one of their pain points. They want to know, where is the perfect API that I can solve my use case, my problem with? Where do I find it? How do I find it? How do I know? And maybe also they find several APIs that fit their use case, and then they want to know which one is the best one, the one that fits best and that I can use to solve what I actually have. The second problem that they have is the onboarding. How do I get started quickly? I don't want to read 20 pages of documentation before I can start using this API. I just want to start. I want to test it. I want to see it does what I need, right? They don't want to spend lots of time on this aspect. The third point is integration and usage. So how do I make this API work in my environment? Is it even stable, reliable, and secure enough for what I need? Does it provide all the things that I need? Can I really use it? And the last one is the business alignment. Like, can I use this API commercially? Am I allowed to use it? Or there are too many APIs. I don't really know which one fits my business case best, right? So to really select what aligns with the business. So these are usually the things that consumers might have problems with. So let's dig into what developer portals, catalogs, and marketplaces offer and how that fits to these pain points. So you'll see them later again on the slides. We will come back to those. But first, let's go into developer portals, catalogs, and marketplaces. What actually is it, right? Developer portals. Developer portals provide self-service access to APIs, enabling seamless onboarding, documentation, and integration support. That's the usual thing that they do, right? And you already see it in the name. It says developer portal. So usually it's for technical stakeholders at the primary audience. And if you call something a developer portal, you won't expect anyone from business to go there and look there, right? It's for developers. It's clearly targeted to a technical audience. So the features usually contain SDK, sample code, Bruno or Postman collections, very developer-centric, right? Everything they need to get started. The documentation, of course, especially the reference documentation like OpenAPI, Async API, anything like that. Hopefully an interactive API exploration and sandboxes. We said we don't want to read 20 pages of documentation. We want to get started right away, so something to play around with in a sandbox. Of course, probably authentication and API key token management. So as a developer, I can say, yes, I want to sign up for this API. Please give me my API key token, whatever I need to get access. And developer support, probably a forum or something where technical people can ask questions, say, hey, I need help with this API. Why doesn't it work as described, expected, whatever. To summarize it up, a developer portal helps developers understand how to use the API. It reduces friction in integration and first-time use, so it enables very quick first-time use, and it improves the self-service adoption of APIs. People can go there, sign up, get their key, play around, start using the API in a perfect world, right? So that's a developer portal. What's a catalog? So catalogs organize and govern APIs for better discoverability and consistency, right? So catalogs have more this focus on internal technical stakeholders. If you find a catalog, it's mainly company internal, right? Company internal will call, we have an API catalog where we list everything we have, right? And the primary audience, as I said, internal technical stakeholders mostly. So main features of a catalog, sometimes they have a bit of governance and policy enforcement. So you have certain steps to complete to actually get listed in the catalog because somehow your API needs to get there. They usually contain the metadata. So who is responsible for this API? What is the area that it belongs to, like all these categorization stuff. Then you can usually also search, filter, and on these categories. Like and say, well, I look for an API in the finance area which does orders, order payment. Let's see whether they have something, right? So you can search, filter for something. Usually it's used as a centralized API inventory. So somehow, as I said, you can see everything there. And hopefully you have some standardization of the API contracts or dependencies that are there. So you will see them all somehow aligned in the same way if it's done well, right? So what does a catalog help to do? It improves API reuse by making APIs easier to find. So you can find them and see, oh, there's already an API. I don't need to build one on my own. We already have something. It enforces governance and consistencies across teams. And hopefully it reduces duplicate API development and sprawl, right? Because you don't want 5,000 APIs where 20 of them do the same thing. You actually want one good API that does one thing. So, yeah. But as I said, the governance aspect here is very important. If you don't have a lot of governance, that's exactly what happens. I was with a customer once who had an internal catalog, and developers realized that all the things is ordered alphabetically. So guess what they started to do? They started to naming the APIs with underscores at the beginning because nobody found anything in this catalog. There were thousands of APIs in there just to get theirs listed on top and to find it very quickly. Probably not a good catalog, right? Might lead to some problems later. But that's how you can game it, right? If you want to. So, yeah. Let's come to marketplaces. Marketplaces just came up recently a bit. So they usually connect API providers with consumers to enable monetization in partnerships, right? They're on a whole different level. So usually they are really for external people. Some marketplaces are very business focused, others include the technical aspect as well, but mainly external people, right? No one who's in my company, but if I want to present something to the outside. Which also means, usually, of course, they do not contain all the APIs like a catalog, but a very small amount of well-curated things, right? So what do we have here? On marketplaces, we see usually features like ratings, reviews, and community engagement. So more also like I can review, I can talk about how I use the API, stuff like this. Very important legal agreements and SLA visibility. So if I go external, of course, people are interested in the legal aspects because they need to know how they can use this API. I will have lots of provider and consumer onboarding, probably even a bit more than in my developer portal or in my internal catalog, because these are maybe developers that never used any of my company's APIs, so I need to tell them from the start what to do. And usually they have stuff like billing and revenue sharing mechanisms and API pricing models. Like, how can I sell my API to the outside world, right? So, to sum it up, Marketplaces are usually there to expand API adoption beyond internal teams. They support commercialization and revenue generation, and they help business leaders track their API consumption effectively. That's what they should do. So if you see it like that, I said at the beginning, I was working on a project when I started at Codecentric that was developing an API developer portal. If I would see it today, it was actually a marketplace because it was external and it contained business content. And I don't know whether any one of the business target group ever came there because it was called developer portal, right? So that's an important aspect to consider. And that's why I also wanted to clarify what are actually these different types and why should I pay attention to what I name my product, yeah, or how I name it, because this will influence how people use it and what features people will expect from it. Now, let's come to the missing piece. What could it be? We talked a lot about these 3 types now, but there's still something that's probably missing. What about the API life cycle and evolution? So far, we focused mainly on the consumers, right? The consumers will go somewhere, find the API, but somehow the API has to get there. The provider somehow has to list it in the catalog or get it in the developer portal. How do we handle this? Who ensures the consistency, the versioning, the smooth evolution, everything we need to actually discover them? And there's something new that came up recently. You maybe heard the term as well, API registries, another buzzword, let's say. So registries are mainly focusing on managing API artifacts for lifecycle transparency. So here it's not so much about the consumer, but about the provider who somehow needs to manage the API artifacts and later get them in the discovery tooling, right? So the API owner is here our primary audience, the person who needs to take care that this API is handled correctly. And usually features that they have is versioning and change tracking. So really I can see what happened with the API. Schema and dependency awareness. It would usually be the centralized API definition storage. So there I have really all the things regarding the API, the open API files or whatever files, right? The one single source of truth, let's say, and a lifecycle state management. So that I exactly know, is this API already in production or not? Where is it in the lifecycle? Will it be deprecated? Everything that you need to actually present it to your consumers later on. So what do we need the registry for? Summary, ensuring the API lifecycle transparency, improving collaboration, and it provides the structured source of API artifacts. So these are the words that fly around in the space. Okay, this one turned out just okay. It's back. So registries support API producers and governance teams by providing the structured artifact management, while the portals, catalogs, and marketplaces focus on API consumption and discoverability, that someone can consume the API. So that's an important difference to understand if you're working in the field, right? That there are different target groups that need something from you if you're providing or consuming an API. So the final question, when to use what? Now we have 4 buzzwords, but when should we use which one? And how should we call our tool if we have one, right? So first of all, think about what's the main problem you want to solve with the tool, right? What are the problems? For example, do your developers struggle to find and use APIs? Yeah? Do they struggle because they don't know how to get the tokens, how to get the keys, how to get the technical documentation? Or do you have a problem with API sprawl? You have many APIs, you have not much governance, not much discoverability. People will prefix the APIs with an underscore to find them, right? Because there's so many. Or are you at a point where you're saying, oh, we're ready to scale API adoption beyond internal use and we want to go to the outside world. We want to present a curated set of our APIs to everyone, right? So that's the question, where are you in the journey? What's your biggest problem here? And then we're getting back to the consumer needs that we saw at the beginning, the pain points, the discoverability, the onboarding, the integration and usage, and the business alignment. And we'll check with the 3 tools that I presented for the consumers. How does this map to the needs that we saw? So for discoverability, The developer portal is not necessarily the primary focus. It's more on getting the technical documentation, understanding how the API works, getting the token, and so on. The catalog is perfectly great for discoverability. It contains all the metadata, the categorization, taxonomy, and so on. And also API marketplaces are usually good for discoverability, but more on a pricing or ecosystem fit, right? More on a business level, let's say, discovering APIs. For onboarding, actually, that's the heart of the developer portal, right? Onboarding developers, tutorials, interactive documentations, SDK, sandboxes, everything I already talked about. For catalogs and marketplaces, it's not really a core function. A catalog usually doesn't support, or there are many catalogs that don't support any additional documentation besides a reference documentation or something like that. And also the marketplace is usually very limited in this regard or contains more business relevant information. For integration and usage, developer portals are hopefully self-service. You can go there, you can subscribe, get your token, you're done, right, as a consumer. So they should be self-service as much as possible. Catalogs usually are more a governance tool, so not really much on integration and usage there. For API marketplaces, yes, they might rather offer pre-built stuff often for business users more, or also more stuff like business related because there's monetization behind the API, so you might need to buy something and so on. And they also focus on the contracts. And business alignment, I think that's clear. Developer portals, it already has it in the name. They should be mostly developer-centric. API catalogs support the API lifecycle governance or help with governance if done right. And marketplaces enable the monetization and partnership features. So depending on what you want to achieve, pick your tool, right? And now, how does this fit together with the registry? We came up with this API consumer access model to show a bit how can it look like. The registry would always be at the top, as you see here, and then you could sync your APIs to whatever tools you have, right? The registry is your single source of truth, and even if you might decide you have an internal API catalog and an external API marketplace, for example, then you could sync your APIs there, depending on where you want them to show up. And you would have different consumers, developers and engineers, internal teams and architects for discoverability and governance, and for the marketplace, monetization and partnerships for your partner and business teams. So that's a bit the summary of everything that I talked about here. Final thoughts and takeaways. So where are you in that journey? Think about how do you enable your consumers today? What tools do you already have? How do you name them? Are they correct for the target group? Are you sure they include all the features that people expect from your tools? And where do you still see gaps maybe in your API ecosystem, in the tooling you have, in the discovery tooling you have? Where do you still see points for improvements, right? Where can you still maybe add a marketplace or improve your catalog or your developer portal to actually achieve more? That's it. Here, again, a short summary. So, first of all, developer portal, catalog, or marketplace. All tools serve different but complementary roles in a way. API consumer adaptation depends on choosing the right tool. I know there are tools that promise that they can do all of these, but you know, there might be better to have a focus sometimes, depending on what you want to achieve and what problem you want to solve, and not try to tackle all the problems at once. Yeah, so APIs are more than just interfaces. They power ecosystems. Choose the right tools to support your consumers to unlock the real business value. Thank you very much.